The question is that the bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the member for Sturt on a well-researched and well-delivered speech on a very important topic. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do rise in support of the Counter-Terrorism Legislation Amendment, AFP Powers and Other Matters Bill of 2022. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's an often quoted phrase that the condition upon which, there's an often quoted phrase of the eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And that phrase is often ascribed to Thomas Jefferson. But the first person that's purported to have said that dates back to 1790. And it was an Irishman, John Philpot Curran, who said, "The condition upon which God hath given liberty to man is eternal vigilance." And that pretty much sums up the importance of this bill. The bill provides for the continuation of counter-terrorism powers held by the AFP, which are due to sunset on the 7th of December of this year. This bill seeks to extend those powers until December of 2023. These are powers which the previous coalition government implemented in 2021 as part of our extensive work to strengthen Australia's national security. By extending the sunsetting date by 12 months, the government and the opposition can reach a bipartisan position on new legislation to amend Part 5.3 of the Criminal Code Act of 1995 based on the recommendations of the PJCIS, on which I am very proud to serve as the Deputy Chair. The previous member speaking, the member for Sturt, spoke at some length about the importance of the PJCIS, and I've only been on the committee for a very short while, and I do want to take this opportunity to commend the outstanding work that has been done by my immediate predecessor, or the immediate chair of the committee, Senator James Paterson. As I said, I've only been on the committee for a short while, but his depth of knowledge in relation to intelligence and security is really quite remarkable. And I also want to acknowledge the work of the now Shadow Minister for Defence, the member for Canning, who preceded Senator Paterson. Both these gentlemen have done outstanding work in their work on the PJCIS. The PJCIS is perhaps the most important committee in this place. It provides much needed oversight over our intelligence agencies. And we live in a parliamentary democracy which is constantly under threat. But it is very important that if we have these very significant powers, that our security agencies have these powers, it is important that we have appropriate checks and balances on our security agencies. And the PJCIS, along with the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, perform these roles of checks and balances over our intelligence and security architecture in this country. Now, we should never fall victim to any form of hubris when it comes to terrorism or national security. This country, sadly, is constantly at threat of terrorist attacks by those who would seek to do us harm, whether they are state-based actors or lone wolf actors. It is very important that our security agencies have the sort of powers which I'll go through shortly, but it is equally important that we have appropriate checks and balances on those agencies to ensure that they conduct themselves appropriately within the confines of the law, and that any potential overreach is dealt with. As we discussed yesterday, we acknowledged the National Police Remembrance Week. We have a great responsibility in this place, and I believe in our broader community, to recognise the importance of the work that is done by our policing services, both at a state and territory level and, importantly, at a federal level. Australia's national terrorism threat today remains at probable. There's credible intelligence assessed by Australia's security agencies indicating that malicious actors have the intent and capability to conduct a terrorist act in Australia. This bill will provide for the continuation of key counter-terrorism powers reserved for the AFP to keep Australians safe. All powers will continue to be subject to robust safeguards and oversight, as I said earlier, with the PJCIS and the Inspector General for Intelligence and Security overseeing those agencies. The bill extends the sunset clause by 12 months in relation to three key powers. They are control orders, prevention detention orders, and emergency stop and seizure powers. Now, in relation to the control orders, these are provisions which allow the Federal Court or the Federal Circuit Court to impose an order which places tailored obligations, prohibitions and restrictions on an individual who continues to present a risk to the community. A preventative detention order allows a person to be detained without charge and can only be used where the AFP reasonably suspects that an attack could occur within 14 days or in the aftermath of a terrorist attack to preserve vital evidence. In relation to the emergency stop, search and seizure powers, these provisions allow police to request a person's name, address and other details. They allow police to conduct a search for a terrorism-related item and to seize such an item, and they allow police to enter premises without a warrant to prevent a serious and imminent threat to a person's life, health or safety. Now, some would argue that these provisions, these orders, are draconian in nature, that take away people's liberty. And that is correct, they do. But this is the nature of the serious threat that this country faces and, in fact, many Western countries face. And these are provisions that we would rather not have. But in order to keep Australians safe, this parliament and previous parliaments have considered that they are vital, with appropriate checks and balances. Now, to date, Madam Deputy Speaker, no preventative detention orders have been made and no incidents have required the use of the emergency stop, search and seizure powers. Although these powers have not been used to date, this actually demonstrates that the AFP are very judicious in their application of these far and broad powers, far-reaching and broad powers. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would suggest to this chamber that Australians can and in fact should be very proud of the members of the ADF. Of the AFP. They should also be proud of the ADF, of course. But confining my remarks to the AFP, for 43 of the last 75 years, the AFP have contributed to global peacekeeping efforts and supporting Australia's role in maintaining law and order at home and abroad. Thanks to the previous coalition government's record investment in the work of the AFP and our nation's law enforcement and security agencies, Australia has led groundbreaking operations and international partnerships to make our country, our region and our world safer. Madam Deputy Speaker, consider Operation Ironside. This was a sophisticated sting, or was a sophisticated sting with the FBI that targeted the criminal underworld and saw more than 350 local arrests, 6.3 tonnes of drugs seized and 6 drug labs shut down. Consider Operation Vader, which took down 2 global narcotic crime syndicates spanning across 5 countries. Once again, Operation Appleby. It's the largest counter-terror probe in Australia, which took down a Sydney terror cell. And consider the vital work of the Australian Centre to Combat Child Exploitation, which I had the privilege of visiting just a couple of weeks ago. The AFP, through the ACE, is leading the world in employing new technology and tactics to protect our children, and has resulted in over 2,700 charges being laid against predators and consumers of child abuse material. And today, Madam Deputy Speaker, just in the last few days we have learnt about the cyber attack on Optus. The Australian Signals Directorate, along with the AFP, are working closely together with Optus to try and identify the culprits under Operation Hurricane, together with overseas law enforcement agencies, to investigate this hack, this threat that's exposed almost 10 million Australians and their private information. So the AFP are at the cutting edge in relation to not just the protection of children, but certainly in relation to cybersecurity and many other endeavours. I was listening with great interest when the member for Sturt was talking about his experience in London when the terrorist attacks were happening in London. And it reminded me of how Leonie and I were in Melbourne one Christmas time, and we were staying in a hotel, and literally we were in the hotel and all hell broke loose just across the road at the Federation Square. I can't remember the year, it would have been about 10 years ago. And as it turned out, AFP and Victorian Police pounced on some would-be terrorists and thwarted a terrorist attack. I think it was on the 23rd of December. It's my anniversary date, so I remember the date. It was the 23rd of December, about 10 years ago. And it really brought home, because it was actually at Federation Square, and the police intervened seemingly with moments to spare. And it really brought home to me that what we saw in New York and Washington and London can very well happen here in Australia. And of course we saw that with the terrorist attack at the Lindt store in Sydney. So for anyone who thinks that Australia is immune or somehow is quarantined from the risk that we have seen in other terrorist attacks in other countries around the world, such as in the US and the UK, that is a very, very dangerous presumption to hold. All Western democracies are at risk in the face of terrorism. It is true that terrorism has taken a back seat in recent times to seemingly more pressing issues such as COVID and the threats that we face from a geopolitical perspective. But terrorism, there are still those who are out there within our own communities, both from a religious perspective and a right-wing perspective, that seek to do Australians harm, and this bill will continue the protections that Australians deserve for another 12 months, and I commend the bill to the House.
The question is that the